question.
Yeah.
Could you recommend a resource for basically just kind of fundamental, the fundamentals of getting listings, how to talk to potential sellers, just kind of fundamental things, how to generate new business and get listings? Can you recommend a resource?
I think the IBBA courses, I think IBBA has some courses on procuring listings. I think actually the IBBA is probably going to be your best resource, quite honestly. And then you can talk, there's lead gen companies out there if you want to buy prospects or potential leads. But you're right, in terms of just talking to those sellers and going through, here's the process we go through to sell your business. Getting the preliminary qualifications or qualifying those sellers to see if you even want the listing. All of that is a necessary part of it, because the last thing you want to do is take on a bunch of listings that are not saleable. Because, nobody, I remember when I got into the business and I was with a franchise organization, and they told us you need to have 20 listings at all times. And they would tell us, you go on a listing appointment, take the paperwork with you, ask the seller a few questions, and whatever they want for the business, that's fine. Put it on the paper, have them sign it to get them under contract. And, then once you have their business tied up, then you can try and talk them down to a reasonable price. But that's just a way to end up the hamster on the wheel, right? Because you end up taking listings that are not saleable at prices that are not saleable. You don't have any paperwork to substantiate your asking price. You prepare all this marketing information and start advertising these things. Now you've got some buyers that inquire, and you're having to deal with confidentiality agreements and getting those signed and all of that. And following up with those buyers. But ultimately the buyer is going to say, well, how'd you come up with the price? And when you say, well, that's what the seller wanted, that's never a good answer. And so, I think what you want to have is quality listings that are saleable, because it's that's the only way we get compensated, right? Is when we actually sell the business. You don't get compensated for listing the business. So, and I think qualifying the sellers is important. I had somebody send me an email this morning where the last couple of years, the gross revenue was like 300,000 or so. And all of a sudden this year they're on track to do $1 million in gross revenue. It's like, well, how did that happen? And is it sustainable? Because a buyer is going to look at that and say, you had 300, and now you're on track to do $1 million. What changed? Right? And the response that I got was that, no, it's just, they just weren't declaring it before. Like, okay. So A, that's tax fraud, not good. B, based on the type of business they were and the fact and their clients were probably from all over the country, that would indicate to me that there would be credit card, merchant account records or something that could substantiate the actual revenue. So ultimately, that's what I said is, okay, just, ask for the merchant account statements for the last 2 years and let's see what the real deal is. Because otherwise, there's no, otherwise the business is just not saleable at the price that the seller wants, because we can't substantiate a track record. And, buyers are going to look at it and say, well, is 2024 an anomaly, or is it sustainable? And that's where it's going to be going forward in terms of revenue. So, if it's an outlier and it's going to drop back down to 300,000, they don't want to overpay for the business. And if it's, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
So in terms of qualifying a seller and getting a representation agreement signed and that kind of thing, the way I've been approaching it is I've talked to a lot of people and basically said, well, listen, I'll give you a back of the napkin valuation or opinion of value if you'll send me a P&L. And I've kind of just lost a lot of people in limbo at that point, and not gotten any P&Ls. And I've had someone recommend, well, you should have the business reference guide open on your computer when you're talking to them, ask them to estimate their revenue and try and give them that opinion of value right there on the phone when you're talking to them, and then try and drive them into a representation agreement. What are your thoughts?
I tend to do things a little differently. So my initial conversation with a seller is usually to ask them about the business and let them talk. And so, I take some notes, or sometimes I record it. It just depends. But, I want to know when the business was established and how many employees they have. And I'll ask them what their gross annual revenue was for last year, total dollars through the door, 2023. And then I explain to them about the process. And I say, look, the process of selling a business, the first thing we have to do is determine what the market value of the business is. And in order to do that, we're going to need some documents from you. So, we don't charge for doing the valuation, but that is part of our own preliminary due diligence. We're going to need the last 3 years of your business tax returns, P&Ls, balance sheets. And once we get off of this call, I'll send you an email with the list of documents that we need. But that is, the first step. Then once we determine what we think we can sell the business for, if that's a number that makes sense to you, at that point, we can choose to move forward. Then we'll do representation paperwork and all of that. We'll put together marketing packages. We'll go to market. We'll process buyer inquiries. We also do, I also do like a interview. I recorded an interview with the seller. So we set up an interview Q&A sheet or page that's confidential. So I talk them through what this process is and let them know, how we handle things going forward. But then I come back to, again, first step is we have to figure out what we think we can sell the business for, and if that's a number that makes sense to you. Because if it's not, if we come up with 650 and you want $1.2 million, then what we need to do is talk about how you can get your business to that target of $1.2 million. Because it doesn't serve either one of us for us to try and list your business at $1.2 million if we can only substantiate a value of 650, right? You're just going to burn buyers and waste time. So I don't ever give them a price over the phone. And I don't, I'm not going to do a valuation off of 1 year's P&L, because that's not a good use of time either. Again, it could be an anomaly. They could be having a really bad year. They could be having a really good year. You always need 3 to 5 years of history. I'll do it off of 3. If it's a bigger business, I want 5.
Excuse me, Tawnya, during your process, let's say everything perfect to the end, and then how do you find the buyer prospect list, do you pay for your someone company to give you the buyer list? Can you recommend us? How can we get the?
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of business. So once we list the business, if it's a Main Street business, we're probably going to market it in BizBen, BizBuySell, BizQuest, all of the standards. And then, depending on what it is, if it's manufacturing or if it's construction trade, then we'll pull a list of all the different, like an HVAC company. So I have an HVAC company, then I'm going to pull a list of all the HVAC companies in the area, within, a 50, 100-mile radius or whatever, and contact them and ask them if they're interested in expanding through acquisitions.
Can I do the same to the hotel? This is the hotel listing 77.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can you can pull down a list of hotel owners. I mean, Reonomy used to be good for that. And now I think we used to use Reonomy for that. I don't think there are other tools that can do that. I don't work so much with real property, but I think Reonomy had the ability to tell you who the owners were, even if the property was owned by an LLC, it could tell you who the member, it could a lot of times give you the contact information for the members of the LLC, including, their name, email address, phone number, cell phone, whatever. So it was a good way of contacting them.
What does that Reonomy, did you say? Can you spell it?
REONOMY.
Thank you.
Sure.